All right, let people file in.
All right.
Welcome everybody.
Are people there already?
There you can see on the bottom there. People are coming in.
Hey everybody, don't be shy. Come on in. There's plenty of room for everybody.
I see it. Just counting them off right there. 21, 122, 123. That's good. Does the crew, do the people watching, do they also see who's in, who all their friends are that are watching, or can we see who's on there or not?
Just one way. See, I think you can see, but they can't see.
Okay.
Anyway,
like a list of names or something next to there, or not? They can't see anything.
Nope. It's a panopticon.
Oh, I can see the attendees though.
You can, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
All right, well, here I'll start it off.
Thank you, Chris.
Welcome everyone to Powerhouse Arena's virtual events. My name is Chris, and I'm the events coordinator at Powerhouse. And I'm incredibly psyched to be hosting the launch for the Psychic Sophia by Ian Svenonius.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for coming. You'll be able to ask questions through the Q&A function on your screen when the time comes. And you can also buy the book at powerhousebookstores.com. The link is in the event page, and it's also been reposted in the chat. You'll be in conversation with Glenny Friedman, and I'll introduce them now. Glenny Friedman is well known for his influential images of rebellious artists from classic skateboarding, punk, and hip hop. His photographs of musicians such as Fugazi, Black Flag, Public Enemy, Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, Ice-T, Bad Brains and Dead Kennedys, and skateboarders such as Tony Alva and Jay Adams have become the definitive graphic documents of them today. Friedman's work is included in a number of notable international collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Smithsonian Institution.
Oh, that's nice.
Ian Svenonius is the author of the underground bestsellers, The Psychic Sophia, Supernatural Strategies for Making a Rock and Roll Group, and Censorship Now. He's also the host of VBS TV's Soft Focus, and as a musician, he has created more than 20 albums and countless singles in various rock and roll combos, including Chain and the Gang, Weird War, The Makeup, The Nation of Ulysses, Escapism, and others. He lives in Washington, D.C.
Well, thank you very much for coming, everybody. And thank you, Chris, for hosting, or thank you to Powerhouse Arena, and especially Glen for, thanks, Glen. Thanks for...
I don't know whose idea it was to have us together on this, but everyone should know we're great friends. This guy's an amazing guy. Ian has written pieces for at least 3 of my books. He's written the introduction to my Fugazi book. He wrote an essay for my book of cloud photos called Recognize, and he wrote an incredible essay for my book, The Idealist.
That's right. Yes, we have a long relationship, and now we're on the same book. We're under the same imprint. We're working for the same book company. So now we're co-workers as well as friends. And
are we working for them?
Yeah, I'd say we're working for them. Yeah, I mean,
no, I think they're working for us. No, are we slaves?
I guess well, you know, that's interesting because that brings us to the subject of the book that we're talking about today, The Psychic Sophia, which is.
Could you put that a little closer to the camera so everyone can?
It's actually a repress of it's a book that was previously released, and but you know, the funny thing about art, or you know, expression, is that it kind of changes according to the context that it exists in. So this book, The Psychic Sophia, is a very different book than it was when it was first made 9 years ago.
Can you tell us what is different?
Well, the book was released in a kind of of nationalism, pride, neoliberal excess. It was a really different time, and the reason for the repress was actually because I talked to the publisher, Johnny Temple, and I said, well, I feel like maybe right now is a great time to repress The Psychic Sophia at a time, because this is sort of the ultimate revisionist manual. It's kind of a challenge to every accepted, notion of what has happened, and what's created our, our situation. And right now, with people in the streets, people burning, smashing, they can't get enough stuff to smash. And right now, I think it's a great time, for people to reassess, and that's what this is. It's the Psychic Soviet. It talks about the world in the post-Soviet situation, and it's and everything. It talks about rock and roll. It talks about the disc jockeys. It talks about all kinds of things. There's several essays. They're not necessarily directly related, but they're all, they sit nicely side by side. Anyway, that's my preface.
Your spiel on the book. I've always loved that book. I've loved it since it came out. Can you explain to everyone your fascination with Mao and why you wanted to make it look like Mao's little red book?
Well, the Cultural Revolution isn't something that, is altogether, fantastic. Well, check this out. Isn't altogether fantastic, but it's and it's a period when they created a book in China that was sort of it was a kind of secular Bible, I guess. It was a kind of, moral guide to, behavior. And it coincided with, a complete upheaval of the sort that people are demanding right now in America. A kind of reassessment of everybody's social role, of historical myths. So once again, it just seems like a great time for the Psychic Soviet to relaunch, and it has a kind of, it has a new life, a new personality.
I mean, every time I read it, I have to reassess something in my own life, honestly. And
Thank you.
that's it. Most of the time when I read it, I take it out of my pocket when I'm on an airplane because it just fits perfectly in this pocket, right? And I'll be reading it and I'll start laughing out loud as I'm being educated. Could you explain something to me? Why? I don't know if I even understand, but like how tongue-in-cheek is everything? Why you have? It seems like there's a lot of humor in there. Is it not meant to be humorous?
It's not. I mean, it's we are we're people, and we like to have a good time, but we're also committed to truth and justice. so the it's I don't find that's a paradox. It's like rock and roll can be heavy, but it can be funny. It can be all things at once. So I think the Psychic Soviet attempts to walk that line. Like great rock and roll, like Devo or something, or
So I'm not misreading it by laughing out loud on an airplane and everyone looking at me every once in a while.
Oh no, that's great. That's great. I appreciate that you're an envoy in a place like an airplane, which is it's a very controlled environment.
Well, I think the way that you put the book together and it's all these short stories, it makes it very conducive to someone who's not a really great reader like myself, that you could just read it and it's as you want to, and you could easily finish one or two stories at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we grew up in the rock and roll era when a record is typically not it's not an opera, and it's a collection, and I think that's the way that we understand ideas, or it's in the essay form, it's a lot more like a pop song, so I think it's I wrote the book for people like me who are also I find maybe Proust a little bit difficult because I have a short attention span.
Speaking of short attention span, my son is interrupting. I'm on a live webinar right now. Thank you very much. Sorry about that, Ian.
No problem.
Sorry, everybody. Yeah, you've written many other books since then as well. How were they influenced by this book?
Well, this book was written. This book is a kind of it was really a response to the situation, that it was written in, which was neoliberal triumphalism, a lot of chest beating about America's role as of preeminence, the kind of this extreme. And it was a very extroverted moment in America, and people were loath to to kind of I feel we were embroiled in all these foreign wars, and there was an idea that the U.S. was the sole superpower. So it was a kind of it was basically addressing that situation. And now we're in a very different situation, where America is. We're seeing the empire. It's about to crumble. All the triumphalism about the end of the Soviet Union and the kind of idea that showed great moral authority on the part of capitalism I think that's a myth that has been shattered. I think, America is, ready for, we're destroying the monuments of the past. Everybody's, it starts with the Civil War, but it's, that leads to George Washington and the founding fathers, and the fact that the United States is really a project based on personal greed that used slavery. So what we're faced with is a situation where all the monuments are being destroyed, and they have to be replaced with other monuments. And in the 90s, a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries, the Warsaw Pact countries, took down statues of Lenin and Stalin, and I'm thinking that maybe we can put those up here.
All right.
There's going to be a lot of pedestals that are empty, so.
But I want you to compare your first original. A lot of people, a lot of bands that we used to listen to, and that I still listen to, their first album is usually their best album. Not in all cases, Fugazi being a great exception. I mean, each album just got better and better, but most bands, you have your whole life to create your first album, and then it's out, right? Yeah. And then in the old days, then a year later, you had to put out a new album, or in 9 months, you had to start and make your new album again, The Buzzcocks also had a great second album, but
yeah,
Sex Pistols never had a second album. The Damned never had a good second album, in my opinion, I just like the first album. The Bad Brains, I guess, had all these later records that came out. But your first book, I mean, do you think it all came out there in this volume that you republish now? Or do you think that your new books are valid for the era they were made in?
Well, because it's mostly political or cultural essays, the situation just changes a lot, and technology is constantly changing. So I feel like I've always used the same lens to write everything, which is essentially I was inspired by hearing the socialist critique, the USSR's critique of pop music. When I was making punk rock music, it really struck me that that their official kind of juncture against Prince 1999 was that it was nihilistic and it celebrated nuclear war, and stuff like that, where I was always like, that's interesting. I think that's that voice needs a mouth, needs a exponent in the American milieu, which is extremely to use the word again, triumphalist. We especially rock and rollers, we're always reading these books about rock and roll that are so we're so proud of ourselves for liberating the world or inventing sex or whatever. So I've always wanted to take a different kind of perspective and, write according to that. And so that can kind of, take you, forever, I think, because the technology keeps, changing. I mean, we're in a completely different situation now than from when the Psychic Sophia was written. And we're living in this kind of, libertarian billionaires like, nightmare, I mean, they've, it's just
our nightmare, not theirs. They're taking over.
Yeah, it's our nightmare. But they're defunded everything, and they bought their ranch in New Zealand, and they force everybody to conform to their psychotic technology. That it's a completely different situation, and because of the kind of the situation that we grew up in is it's transformed completely. Like you think about police brutality, which is the topic of the day. Police brutality and murder, these kind of death squad police. I mean, that's a large part, to a certain extent, it's a product of the Cold War, which was this idea of rooting out sedition and seeing, and treating the poor, particularly Black and brown people, as an enemy within the state, So that's like, the police didn't really become militarized until Vietnam, because it's kind of it's analogous to guerrilla, finding the gorillas in the jungle or whatever. And the relationship of the police, to the military with this military funding, things is, it mirrors that kind of thing. So, so anyway, so the fact that it's found, that defunding the police is actually has exponents in high quarters shows that style of policing may have gone out of vogue with the billionaires who run things, because they're libertarians and maybe they don't want to pay for the police anymore, because they've got their own private police. So, a lot of times, the content, the context changes, and that's why we can always write something else, just like you can always make a new song. The context changes, the technology changes, the way people, transmit information changes. I mean, certainly for you with photography, obviously everything changed with digital, the digital media, because at once, on one hand, like the image is more powerful than it ever was, but on the other hand, everybody's supposed to be a photographer. So that
there's way too many images, and now the ones that were great don't have the chance. You have to separate from all the shit in order to get something good out there for people to see it. There's just so much more. There's such a flood of information, of visual information now.
Yeah.
For so many different things, and so many people can do it so easily that they very often they forget and they lose track of what is quality imagery. And the digital age. I mean, a lot of negatives.
In a way, you could see. Because music is the same way. There used to be these kind of gatekeepers who were the record companies who kind of chose what was going to be heard, and now, everybody sort of has the same platform.
Because even when you were on an independent record label, there was someone who was a gatekeeper. Someone made sure it wasn't total shit going out there, And when we did our magazine, fanzines even, you could still get out independently. And there were people, and there were ways to get it out. But you had to work at it. There was you couldn't just click on your computer and your shit is published to the world. I mean, you still had to, find a printer, find a way to distribute it and do that. It still took a lot of work. And nowadays it feels as though, there's very little work that has to be involved. It's very little craftsmanship, so I'm not being an old man and not saying that that's not good. I think it is a good thing that anyone can get their stuff out there. The problem is that it's harder to find the good stuff sometimes. I mean, you would think it would rise to the top, but it doesn't always, because there's just so much crap.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you a question, and you'll go on, because I don't really have any. I didn't write anything down in advance, so maybe we'll ask other people, or you could just go on. But I've noticed since the very first time I ever saw you, the first time I saw you, I think was probably in 1990. And the Nation Ulysses, the band you were in, was headlining a show with Bikini Kill. You, as interesting as they might have seemed, you came out with your shoes on fire for the first 3 songs. And just the presentation of all your projects has always been like kind of incredible to me. It wasn't just the music, and it's not just the words in the book, it's the way you present them. And could you maybe explain that to people who don't understand? I mean, to me, quite honestly, I love you as a performer, but I thought the packaging on the Nation Ulysses albums was better than the music.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, a group is, you know, a lot of things, and it's a lot of it is, you know, the presentation of the group, and you know, it depends on, yeah, and that's another way that technology kind of guides the product, you know, because in the 50s, for example, music was fairly anonymous, you know, with the 45 format, and you know, the record had to make its impact immediately, and there was a lot of radio. People heard music on the radio, which was divorced from image, you know, and then of course in the 60s with album covers, everything became about this, you know, the broader thing, and that you know, Frank Zappa or Alice Cooper, the, you know, people where the packaging became extremely baroque, and there was a whole storyline, you know, and then of course there's the, you know, kind of mythology that surrounds a group, you know, like, I mean, it's quite interesting, and it speaks volumes about racism in the United States, that we know very little about the personal lives of most so-called soul performers, but we know, you know, so much about who Mick Jagger's dated, you know, and so it's yeah, it's an interesting thing. Anyway, you know, the era that Nation of Ulysses, you know, existed in, I would say that you know, it was really about the performance for us. You know, the milieu that we came out of in Washington, D.C. was very, you know, it was about physical performance and kind of communication through like movement. You know, we were really inspired by, you know, Rites of Spring and, you know, Minor Threat and the Bad Brains and these very physical groups. So, you know, but sometimes I hear about, you know, Terry Melcher with the Byrds, you know, their producer, or was it Terry Melcher? I don't know. Their producer would always be like, make them listen to themselves. He always made them listen to themselves. After every practice, he'd tape them, make them listen to themselves, which was something that, you know, we probably should have done more.
But all your projects, even now, I mean, you always look great. You're always to the nines. I mean, you're incredibly photogenic, and you know, in all your bands. But there's a very large visual component. You just talked about Nation Ulysses, and I mean, whether it's the packaging or you yourself on stage, you seem to have a different respect for it that most of the bands of your era didn't. I mean, when the Nation Ulysses came out, you guys were wearing your suits or your uniforms or whatever it was, and then the makeup even more so. And you know, you really, there was a lot of image involved, and I think it's great that you're respecting the form and the performance aspect of it. I mean, maybe I kind of explained it, but maybe you could explain it why. I mean, or maybe you just did. Again, I don't have anything written down here, so I apologize.
No, I like that. I mean, it's also true of the Psychic Sophia. You know, it's always been, you know, I've always felt that aesthetics guides history to a large extent. The thing, you know, would the Bolsheviks have really taken hold without constructivism and without this great, you know, color, you know, they use that kind of orangey red, you know, and then, you know, the constructivism is so great looking, and, you know, it was really like it was a really important aspect, you know, that, you know, to as a carrier for the ideology, you know, and I think that, you know, groups have always been like that. You know, rock and roll was all about pink, you know, people wearing pink, you know, which in the 50s was, I think it was, you know, unusual, you know, and kind of, you weren't wearing makeup and you had pink on, and then it was like, you know, I mean, you know, when you read Link Ray talking about writing Rumble, you know, it was just like, it was, even back then, it was so much about, you know, the image, and, you know, it was so, you know, so, I mean, you know, rock and roll is this kind of technology essentially that was, you know, that's it's just like a great technological invention, you know, it's like the invention of the wheel or something, you know, so it's a, but it's always been, you know, about what does that wheel look like, you know, and that's, you know, it's a big part of the, I mean, that can go too far. Like sometimes I feel like a lot of politics, you know, nowadays they're almost like so aesthetic based that it's, I'm sort of like, well, is that all it is? Is the only thing that we can understand emotions and, you know, appearances, you know, do you know what I mean? Because there's very little patience with the, you know, the, you know, we have very little patience for the, you know, the kind of nuance or nuts and bolts. Do you know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I've always been very, very, very interested in the way things look, and I, you know, somewhat, you know, to my detriment, possibly.
Myself as well, and I think that's why we get along so well. Even though we have such different aesthetics, we appreciate that we both have a certain way we know things have to look.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that even some of my best pictures that I made of your band to makeup, you know, you guys would use the ones I didn't like sometimes. You know, it was funny.
Yeah.
But then the test of time shows that I was always right anyways. Why do you, let's ask you this. I mean, why do you even do it? I mean, why do you, we could start with the music, but I have a feeling the books are similar. Why do it? Why do it at all? What makes you think that people, I mean, yeah, what makes you want to express yourself in the various forms that you have done and that you continue to do? I mean, you're pretty fucking prolific. You've been doing it for more years than most people.
Yeah, well, I just like communicating, you know, I like communicating, and I think that, you know, in a weird way, the older you get, the more you're so remote, your reference points are so remote from the kind of noise of, you know, mass media and the kind of reference points of mass media that that I feel like you have more to give in a certain way, because you know, like I just did a you know, dance tutorial with Tony Basil yesterday, and you know, yeah, and she's just, you know, and it's just a historical lesson that she's giving, and it's so great, and you know, it's just so cool because, you know, that like her perspective on everything is, you know, it's, you know, just like your perspective or my perspective, it's all informed by very specific, you know, things. Nobody else, you know, had that perspective. So I think, but anyway, yeah, I just like to communicate. I like to communicate ideas. And I think it's important that when you're involved in something, like I'm involved in the rock and roll scene, it's up to me. It's a kind of activism. It's up to me to guide it to be the thing that I want it to be. You know, if you know, like I feel like your images of, you know, punk and hip hop really helped to define what those things became to a certain extent. I mean, maybe that's, somebody might say, oh, that's crazy, but you know, I know as a kid reading My Rules fanzine, that was very, you know, important to me. Like, it's like, oh, you know, and you study everything, and you're like, oh, he's got the Black Flag logo drawn on his pants, and you know, you're really like aware of detail, and those details kind of, you know, they have a big impact on what the thing is. So anyway, I've just always been involved, you know, interested in creating a world, you know, in guiding the world that I'm part of. You know, I mean, I'm part of the rock and roll scene, which is so unpopular that it's almost mind-boggling. Like, so few people care about underground music. When, you know, when you tally up the numbers, like if you're looking at it by the numbers, it's incredibly insignificant. But, you know, that's my little world, and that's what I care about. And it's, and you can't fake the numbers anymore, because everything now is based on numbers. Like YouTube, it's like, who's got the numbers, you know? It's like, who, like 1,000 people saw, you know, my latest video, but, you know, 50 billion people saw, you know, the latest Beyonce video or whatever.
Both did Beyonce in stereo. That's kind of fucked up.
But
the go-to biggest thing in the planet.
But you know, back in the old days, like Billboard was totally cooked. You know, it was like basically the charts, the Billboard chart was a survey of hip record store clerks. So they would be like, oh, who's number one this week? And then the hip record store clerk would say, oh, you know, the Beatles or whatever. But you know, if they were telling the truth, they would have been Connie Francis or Doris Day, probably. You know.
I think you clearly care more about than what you just said. You said you care just about, you know, your own world, but you care about the outside world as well, and so do I. And I think when we're talking about our imagery as well, I think that as creators and people who have, you know, I don't know, you're a visionary of sorts, you know, we kind of idealize things, and that's how we present them to people. Do you agree? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've always hated like tell-alls about, you know, celebrities or these kind of like smear pieces, because I'm like, well, we're all like, you know, disgusting, you know, but why do we need to know that? You know, I don't need to see. So I want to see you know, to me, what a band is, or a record is, or a photograph, it's an idea, it's an idealization, it's something that we're striving for. When you look at you know, film of Martin Luther King, and he's got that light on him, you know, the old, you know, those old lights, and then it's grainy. It's like it's an ideal. I don't care about his personal life, you know, honestly.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Because
what was going on backstage? It's what happened on stage that matters. Who the fuck cares about all that other shit?
And yeah, absolutely. But that being said, people say, oh, well, you know, you've got to be consistent. It's like, well, you know, okay, that's fine. I mean, we're people who, I mean, moral, you know, morality, it's an interesting thing, you know. I mean, like you're a vegan. You're a vegan, I'm vegetarian. It's like, in the future, will people, you know, these, you know, to me, that's an obvious moral issue. You know, like I don't, you know, I feel uncomfortable with, you know, people killing animals. I never talk about it, you know, out loud, except for right now. But, you know, but in the future, I think maybe that'll be, you know, considered a, you know, a grievous crime, you know, if people are still, you know, living in the future.
If they're still living, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think it's important to communicate these ideals so people who are, you know, not in the places we are get to maybe, you know, associate themselves and understand that there are other people that think like them, and it gives them, you know, hope, and it inspires them to maybe live differently and, you know, see things differently, or also that they have a comrade that feels the same way they do, you know, because you might be in a little place somewhere where people aren't doing this or aren't doing, you know, you're the only one doing that. I mean, I remember in the early days of punk rock, that's how we had these really, you know, we had pen pals, and we all wrote to each other. All, you know, we supported each other's scenes, and everyone, you know, a band would come from one scene to the next, and you know, we had a similar way of thinking. And really, Ian, do you think that in your work, as much as I do, and it might sound pretentious to some people, but we're really just trying to make the world a better place. What do you think about that?
You know, I think so. Yeah. I think
even if you want to burn it down, why do you want to burn it down? Because you want to make it a better place, right?
Yeah. I think that's. I mean, I want to make it a more interesting place. I don't know if I want to make it a better place, because like I like a lot of bad things, you know.
Oh, okay.
Like, you know, when I see like an old sign, you know, for an old gas station, you know, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like I want it to be there, but
that is better.
I don't know. Good. But anyway, you know. But that's the conservative in me. Anyway, yeah, I do want the place. I want the world to be a better place, and that's why I'm really excited about this modern epoch that we're, you know, that we're engaged in right now. It's like, it's incredibly exciting. And I got to say, I'm pretty excited that people aren't wearing masks or whatever, and that they're spreading the virus more, and it's getting worse, because I feel like in a way, you know, things have got to get worse before they get better, you know.
Oh,
And the more, you know, crazy, you know, like right now, what we're having in America, like, you know, people are getting unemployment, and that is so un-American. Like, the idea that people are getting checks from the government is so insane. It's something I never thought would happen ever. You could have, I would have bet, I would have bet the farm on it, you know, but people are getting money from the government, and they're getting, you know, food stamps, and it's just insane. It's so un-American. And once they get a taste of that, then they're gonna, you know, then they see, oh, well, all this, you know, production crap, this thing that we're all supposed to be, you know, a brand on Instagram and constantly be like flogging our goods, and, you know, and selling ourselves, and, you know, that we're just this, you know, it's like Logan's Run right now. You know, everybody's like this, you know, product that's just being, you know, assessed for its, like, you know, whatever, for its luscious physicality. But, you know, right now we're, you know, at this, you know, in this kind of crucible, I think is the word. And, you know, I think the crucible should keep going for a little bit. Also, you know, it's a good time to, I think, you know, it's like it's like a reversion to childhood, and you get to kind of survey, you know, all the things, you know, the reason people are so informed by their childhood is because it's so boring, and they have so much time to like stare at a book or something. And, you know, for the first time in my adult life, I'm not going on tour, and I'm not driving across the country. I'm not, you know, going somewhere. It's like, it's incredible in terms of you like looking at, you know, things, and, you know, kind of, you know, just, you know, I know a lot of people are saying this. It's not an original idea, but I think it's, you know, it's good. And just like the barbarians, you know, destroyed Rome, and it probably seemed like a bad thing to Romans at the time. Well, you know, I think that, you know, these people barbecuing, you know, and, you know, out there, and they're just like, I don't know, there's something, you know, it's like a you know, it's like the barbarian invasions right now.
you're equating, are you just saying that barbecues and barbarians are equal?
You know. Anyway, so, but I think
that's a good taste, by the way, of how you will see things compared in Ian's book, The Psychic Sophia, which, if you don't have it yet, if you didn't go to your local bookseller or to akashicbooks.com, you should go get it there. You know, yeah, that's the place to get it. And by the way, they republished 2 of my books too, as well, my Dogtown book and the Fugazi book that Ian wrote the introduction to. And you can get those there too, by the way, at Akashic Books.
In what's called a fun bundle. And if you get all of Glen's books and all my books together, then they'll give you a kind of special deal.
They just might. I don't know. Johnny's going to kill us when he hears us saying that. But only 2 of my books are on there. And do they now publish all of your books? Are all of your books now available through Akashic?
All my books. And yeah, but anyway, yeah. So, but this is good also, this book reissue, not just because it has a new kind of resonance and relevance to the modern milieu, which is a kind of cultural revolution that we're going through, where up is down and down is up and left is right, north is south, and everything's topsy-turvy. Well, which is kind of what happened with the Cultural Revolution, because as I understand it, during the Mao's Cultural Revolution, like, suddenly it became in vogue to spit on the ground and, like, you know, go to the bathroom in public. Everything, you know, bourgeois values were blown out of the water, and every kind of vulgarity was celebrated and practiced. So so it was a little like Marquis de Sade or something in China, and like people are just, you know, going crazy and letting loose. And that's kind of what's happening now with America in 2020, because everybody's vacation plans have been modified, and they're just and because they're no longer exploring Barcelona or the, you know, the beaches of, you know, Ecuador, then suddenly they have to explore their perversions.
Pretty fun. I think we got only about 20 minutes left. If people want to start sending questions, I don't know if I'm going to read those, or you're going to read those, or Chris is going to read those. I don't know if that's going to go, but people should start, adding some questions there. What do you think about that, Ian?
Sure. How do we do this again? So it's Q&A.
I don't know. The only time I ever did a Zoom meeting before was for my kids' PTA meeting. That was pretty. It's a little different than this.
It looks like we already have some questions, and the first one is there political importance to Washington, D.C.'s go-go music? If so, what is it? Now, this is a topic that's very close to me, and I want to thank Alessandro Nahan for asking this question, because I love go-go music. And Glenn, I know that you've taken a picture of the Junkyard, but you took some very incredible pictures of Junkyard Band, which are one of the greatest go-go bands of all time. Isn't that right?
I'm partial to Trouble Funk, but yeah.
Great.
Junkyard Band were pretty incredible because they were like kind of punk rock within the Trouble. I mean, within the whole go-go scene, because they were so young, right? They were just little kids.
And they were like Menudo. They switched members, and
that's true too. But they did play on Garbage. They did play on actual Garbage, which most people might not know.
They were like Einstürzende Neubauten, but without the pretension. They were like the real thing. They were kids who were growing up in this post-apocalyptic, like, the Washington, D.C., which at that time was completely, it was talk about underserved. It was a very underserved place with all these scumbag landlords who divested from the city, and nobody could, there was no money, and they were just, because once DC won its, its kind of autonomy, or, once it kind of got home rule or whatever, then obviously it was like the blackest place in America. So the federal government had to kind of, crush its will, So go-go music grew up out of that. And it was actually inspired by Chuck Brown, who was on Sussex Records in the 60s, and he was playing with some boogaloo bands. And he saw that kind of Caribbean, it's a very like, African percussion thing with all the percussion up front, and that, Caribbean, king, and he brought that down to DC. And it was at a time when everybody loved Earth, Wind and Fire and Kool and the Gang, and Chuck Brown's band and all the go-go bands, which is the movement he started. They were kind of they were approximating Kool and the Gang, but with this kind of boogaloo, Latin percussion thing. And go-go was going to be big because Trouble Funk, as you know, signed with Sylvia Robinson's label, Sugar Hill. And so they had some big hits, and they were backing up a lot of people. But then, hip hop started in New York at the same time. And it was kind of it was an open question, which was going to be the next big music. Was it going to be go-go, or was it going to be hip hop? And you know what? People still don't know which one's going to win. No, but hip hop won, which was hip hop, obviously based on the kind of doo-wop and girl groups, and these like little singing like street corner singing groups that were popular in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, Philadelphia and New York and stuff, and groups like whoever, the Moon Glows or whatever. So that's kind of what hip hop was. So it was really like the difference was the go-go band, which is this big amorphous kind of community band without really a main without really a lead singer a lot of times, just this kind of chant thing. So it's kind of like gospel, but like, it was very African. And then the whole, hip hop thing, which is based on the street corner kind of thing.
I think part of the hip hop thing is this too, is that it was so simple. I remember a friend of mine, she used to be a camp counselor, and she told me that, when Lottie Dottie came out with Slick Rick and Dougie Fresh, that the whole camp bus of like 5 to 10-year-olds would be singing every lyric to Lottie Dottie. I think that has plays a part in it becoming so popular. It was so simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for a go-go record, I mean, there weren't really any records, right? I mean, they had a couple of songs, but generally the best go-go records that I knew of were like 4 sides of LPs, and it was just one continuous song the whole time. So you're not going to get played on any commercial radio station because they just can't capture it, right? They can't market it properly. And I mean, it is miraculous how it never really got out of DC, except for the most avid collectors. You know, I learned about it because when Henry Rollins came to California to be in Black Flag, and we were driving to a gig, you know, from LA to San Francisco or something, in the car, he would play a Trouble Funk record and it would get us like halfway there, you know, it just, you know, and that was great. You're like, wow, that was a fast trip. We only heard one record, you know, the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I think that's why I got, and also, you know, punk
you think
rockers.
Go-Go's gonna?
Do I think it's gonna what? I didn't hear you.
Do you think it's gonna win out? Like in
I don't know. I don't think so.
It's like the turtle in the hare, maybe. Okay, wait. Another question. If you enjoy communicating and expressing yourself in various media, how do you maintain your mystique? That's a very good question. Another one from Alessandro Nahan. Now, I really appreciate this question, Alessandro, because mystique is very important and it's almost impossible to maintain in a Zoom conference. Like, in fact, when I heard about people doing these Zoom things, I said, you know, at the beginning of this quarantine, I said, I will never do that. I would never do that. It's vulgar. People look horrible. It's the microphone on the computer there's no way that you could convey any gravitas or, as you said, mystique. And the only reason I'm doing it is because it's an opportunity to talk to Glen and in public, which is it's just exciting. We've never done it before. Actually,
no, we did for my rules book, and we did it with the same group of people. We did it at Powerhouse.
You're right.
And that was before Superiority Burger was open, and Brooks was serving us food for free for all the guests and everything. That was amazing. He was still punk rock then. He wasn't a rock star chef yet. He was trying to be one, and he became one. That's good, but that was nice. He gave us all free food, all great vegan food. And you and I had a discussion there at the Powerhouse Arena when it was a real arena, not a fucking virtual screen thing here. But I want you to read more questions, but I saw one that really disturbs me that I always see is that, what's your next book? And I would just like to say to anyone who asks that question, fuck off unless you've read all the other books first. Don't ask what's next until you have everything else mastered. Please. Thank you very much. And if you have, apologies to you, and you could let me know. But if you haven't read everything else already, please, you know, go read everything else. Familiarize yourself with everything before you ask for more. Ian is not a fucking machine. He's a creator. And when he has new shit coming, it'll come out.
Well, thanks, Glenn. I appreciate that because there is an incredible pressure on everybody, not just me or you, but everybody out there to create a kind of opus right now because the idea is that we have all the time in the world and that, you know, oh, well, now you're supposed to just be, you know, creating the, you know, the ring cycle or something, you know, or some like Gesamtkunstwerk. Well, let me just tell you something about that idea. It's, you know, the problem with that is that, well, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, wait, another question. Hold on. No, the problem with that is that time seems to have shifted. You know, while we've been locked inside, you know, when you're in prison, time is different. You know, it's a little like going to the other galaxy and putting yourself in a cryogenic freeze. You know, your kind of body functions all slow down and everything become, you know, it's a little like, you know, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but, you know, the sun's moving at a different pace and the moon cycle is different. Everything's different. So you have to let yourself off the hook and you don't have to feel so bad that you didn't, you know, write Sgt. Pepper's yesterday. That's my grand statement to the listener out there. Anyway, but also, oh yeah, Alessandro Nahan has one other question for us, which is—
a lot of questions on there. Why do you have Alessandro asking everyone? Do you just love his questions? Because there's a lot more people asking questions. Come on, Ian.
The early bird gets the worm.
Okay.
Well,
I can live with that. Okay, go ahead.
How did your new project Too Much come about? Well, this is
too much. What's too much?
That's the new record that
Oh,
I
the
did.
new record that we were talking about the other day. Yeah, that's pretty disco-y and pretty fun.
Yeah. It's a new record that's also been designed for this period of this kind of our new penitentiary mode. And as you know, there's a lot of doom and gloom going on, and there's a lot of kind of like, this kind of enforced, with enforced isolation comes a lot of, there's a lot of kind of self-reflection and a lot of people excavating all their worst demons and looking at the world and focusing on, just the worst things, which is important. And I think that's good. And I encourage everybody to in the words of Jim Morrison, wallow in the mire. But also, we have this new disco record that just came out. My friend Rich and I. It's called Too Much, and it's it's available wherever. Anyway,
I heard on Bandcamp. I really enjoyed most of it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
It was very fun. It was very disco-y, but it was like you said, it does sound like it was made for this moment in time. Actually.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. So Greg Nahabadian. Forgive me, Nahabadian.
Very interesting cultural mix of people asking you questions, at least according to their last names.
Yeah, but what's the name? What's in the name now? Shakespeare kind of predicted the punk era when he said, "What's in a name?" Because people, can just make up any name. Names are no longer, you're no longer saddled with Montague or Capulet. You can take whatever name you want. You can be Johnny Lute or Billy Lightning. Anyway, okay. So hi Ian, do you have a plan for a new book? Well, as a matter of fact, instead of a new book, I decided to make a new movie, which is a kind of book. It's a screenplay, and I'm at work with an incredible director, photographer, producer named Alexandra Cabral, and we're we're trying to write the screenplay. I know what you're saying, like that's what every loser in Hollywood says, I'm writing the screenplay and it's about aliens and and cell phones, the radiation, and it's radiating the birds, and the birds start defecating, and there's nuclear explosions, and well, that doesn't mean that this film has no quality. Okay. So the next question is.
Well, that was the one I kind of already answered anyways. That was the guy asking about a new book, and how.
I appreciate your answer too. Question. You can answer all these questions too. So Julia Graf says, any chance you'll perform some Scene Creamer's Weird War songs live again? That's a good question. I've always wanted to do a kind of review, like a Vegas style review, which maybe included a medley, which maybe 30 songs all crushed together in like 4 minutes. So that could be maybe what a Weird War or Scene Creamer's song might be explored in that kind of medley.
I really just want to hear Deathbed Confession. I want to hear Deathbed Confession for 2020.
That's a chain in.
I know that.
Song. Yeah.
I know
Deathbed
that.
Confession.
It's an incredible
Kind
song.
of no, I'm telling the audience. It's not just us. There's
okay, sorry.
Okay, no.
I know that 20 times already.
Okay, so does the new printing here have new content? Maybe it's on colored paper, like when they repress records on colored vinyl. Thanks. Completist in San Diego. Well, let me tell you, Completist in San Diego. I think Glen and I would both like to thank you as a completist, because without the completists, I don't know what we do, because the completists are the only people really who get the stuff, that keeps the engine going, because everybody else kind of surveys it or they just like it, or something. But the completists actually get the thing, they get the new one. And let me tell you, the new Psychic Soviet has some new illustrations that are inspired by my love of the Soviet military and Soviet military's defeat of fascism. Right now we're in a period of time right now where everybody is kind of assessing, the police and, and the racist origins of the country and the racist, superstructure that's, created our current situation. But, the next step is that we're going to start, assessing imperialism and capitalism, completely. We're going to make the correlation between the racist structure at home and the racism of killing people overseas, and the corporate terror state that murdered Gaddafi and killed a lot of Iraqi people. So anyway, the Psychic Soviet is going to be there with you while you're doing this reassessment. And anyway, okay, so the next question. If rock and roll is to become a fully distanced view experiencing moving forward, what will be the equivalent of sweat? Well, this is a really good question from Anthony Austin, because there's been a lot of talk with this quarantine, and people are saying, well, it might be forever. This quarantine might be forever. We just might be living in bubbles.
Feels like
But yeah, because the internet overlords would like nothing more than for us to be isolated forever. Because the tech overlords, they don't have any social skills anyway. They invented all these psychotic ways for us to interact anyway. So they really like it, so they don't really want us to leave the house. So they want us to do everything, online, because then they get the money, like they get, they get all the money. They get every time, you have, intercourse with your sex robot, they're going to get a little piece of the pie, or you sign your virtual consent form, they're going to get a little piece of it. So, so that's an interesting thing, because sweat is that pheromone, the shared pheromone, that before Tinder, that was the way that you connected with people. You smelled them and you were like, oh, and then that's why they said love is blind, because it was really olfactory, But anyway, but without sweat, yeah, there's just these algorithms, and a lot of what attracted us to rock and roll is going to be gone, and it's so the sweat, I don't know. We're going to have to figure it out. That's why we're going to have to break out of these virtual caves at some point. Anyway, okay. So then, Andrew Black, a friend of mine. Hi, Andrew. Hello, Andrew. What advice do you give to young creators who didn't get the luxury of feeling their existence in a pre-internet world? Well, Andrew Black, that's a good question. Andrew Black's a Washington, D.C. person. He's also a person who's not from the United States of America. That the United States of America doesn't include Washington, D.C. There's 50 states.
they might soon, though. They're working on that, aren't they?
Well, yeah. But anyway, so the point is, Andrew, what advice do I have for the young creators who didn't get the luxury of feeling their existence in a pre-internet world? Well, to a degree, I don't know. I mean, what advice could someone give me who existed in a pre-television world? I don't know if it's useful to give somebody advice that doesn't pertain to their situation, but I'm going to try. And I would say that it's that you should don't let the numbers get you down, because you're not creating for the contemporary situation. You're creating for the ideal. We're creating something that we think is not necessary. So the audience might not exist anymore, and the technology might not exist. You're creating something that is, feels right to you. So don't let those numbers on a YouTube page or whatever it is, the sound scan, don't let them get you down. All right. Okay, Alessandro Nahan once again. Should America stay in a state of degeneracy? Is that what they do best? Now, this is a good question. Alessandro Nahan, he's becoming my favorite question asker. I would say that America's state of degeneracy is a big part of our appeal. In fact, the United States of America, it could be argued, won the Cold War because it celebrated its degeneracy. Like the Soviet Union was trying to bring ballet to the common people. They were trying to bring high art down to the masses. Now, America's response was pop art, which was bringing trash to the rich, you know? So we all know which one prevailed. The pop art equation prevailed. So I think degeneracy is it's a winning formula for better or for worse. Okay, Greg, I have all the books. I've even had Ian sign them all. Well, thank you, Greg. That's rebuttal.
So then I guess you could ask what the next thing is. But you did tell him you told about the movie. That's
The
very
movie,
fun,
which is
Greg. You're a very rare bird, though. Most people don't have them all, and they are always just wanting to know what's next.
What's
So
Fran
thank you for supporting.
That's only wrote like 12 books or something. No, she wrote like 2 books. But we don't love her any less. We love her. Okay. Anthony Sanchez asks, will people gravitating towards pop stars and pop music because of neoliberal individualism ever end? Will rock and roll bands and their socialist communal learnings have their day again? Now, this is a really good question, Anthony Sanchez. And my prediction is that rock and roll, like I said, it's a technological formula, which it's unbeatable. It's just unbeatable. It's sort of like, it's like a kind of, it's just, I don't think that there's any question. It will have its day again, and we will be on top. We'll crush our enemies. Okay, Nadia Gomez. Do you think physical beauty will forever continue to undermine intellectual credibility in women? Nadia Gomez. That's an excellent question. I think that physical beauty is being challenged, like the idea of physical beauty and what it is constantly changing. And it's at a point right now in our multiverse where it's being below, you know, where standards and, you know, where standards and a monolith are being like, you know, hammered mercilessly. And that can only be a good thing. And the problem is intellectual credibility. What is intellectual credibility? Physical beauty is a thing of the past. It's no longer, doesn't even figure into anybody's assessment of anything, I think, or maybe, I mean, it still does, but it won't. But intellectual credibility, that's another thing, because, you know, the intellectual, what is an intellectual at this point? I mean, I don't even know what that word means. I mean, we don't have intellectuals anymore. It's, I don't know. Anyway, okay. So then the next question, Ian, what do you think is more important? Fighting after the political and underlying ancient, perhaps, structures which act as the prime oppressive forces in modern states, or finding your own space for your tribe? Now, this is a really interesting question. Okay, so sorry, I mumbled. What do you think is more important, fighting for the fight, like looking at the macro sphere and fighting on the macro, or creating your own world for you and your tribe? That's an interesting question.
We have to all survive within the same planet. So I think, you know, that's my answer. So you can't just be about
yeah,
you. But you do have to start with what you can control first and then go out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know. It's
I only jumped in because you stalled there. You've been on a good
Oh,
roll. I apologize. This is your event, not mine. I just
well,
want to make
I
that
wish
clear.
that I could just lip sync. You could do the answer and I could just like for that one because I have no idea. Okay, anonymous attendee, Ian and Glen, what's your favorite PG joke? Well, we'll get back to that. Maybe that can be the way we sign off. Okay, anonymous attendee, what's behind the red colorama? Well, red, it's a color of socialism. We have to reclaim red from, the right wing who somehow got red. That's ridiculous. Red is ours. We are red. Blue is for the royal. So the blue is royalist. Blue is the right, the reaction. Red. All right. Question, what is your definition of eco S&M? As mentioned in chapter 1 of Censorship Now. Eco S&M. Yeah, well, eco S&M is a phrase I coined in the chapter 1 of Censorship Now, and I guess it's it's destroying your environment and it's like cutting your nose to spite your face. I guess it's sort of it's Okay, the next question, Nathan Denny. Is this Nathan Denny from the Weirdos? The seminal LA punk band?
Is
that what his name is?
No, that's John Denny and Dick's Denny.
Roman Denny and John Denny. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry, the Weirdos.
Oh, there might have been a third one we didn't know about.
They might have had a brother who was too unsightly to be in the group. Okay, can you speak about the importance and energy owning a physical copy of each of your art? Now, that's an interesting question. Do you mean, I don't know if they mean a physical copy of my art, of the things that I make, or physical copies for other people to own. I think that the record, for example, something that's been demolished, disintegrated, now it's just some anonymous playlist. It has no worth or meaning to anybody. It's, I think that the lack of physicality to music is what directly spelled its demise in the culture. As a culture, nobody cares what a rock star says anymore because records don't exist. And when records existed, people cared because there was a physical thing, and the physical thing made it real to people. And I think physicality is important. We're not digital matter, actually. We're physical. So that's what I think. But I don't own the things that I made necessarily because, you like to give them away to people, and then you're like, oh, I guess I gave it away, which is fine. I think that's cool. Okay, Spencer Compton. Ian, the Tens enjoyed a decade of selective 90s nostalgia. Does Y2K deserve similar commodified attention? I think it's happening already. I think that people are looking fondly back at the kind of amoral licentiousness and the kind of the sleaze-arama of the 2000s was an era when all kind of middle-class guilt or guilt about wealth, about privilege, and any more like morality was just thrown out the window. That's why punk, died, because it was kind of ultimately a very moral reform movement. It had a lot of ethos behind its posturing of nihilism, and in the 2000s it was like it just became purely formal. And I think that people are already looking nostalgically at that era that feels to them guilt-free. It's kind of like the disco era. It's like it was just a era when you were supposed to be rich and party. Okay, Sean Metalcorn. Has hip/cool become a weapon of the right? Was it always? How can neoliberal dandyism be defeated? Well, that's a good question, but I might not be qualified because I really live I'm not that tuned in, so maybe there's some hip right people. I don't know, but I don't know who they are. I just don't feel like I'm qualified to answer that question. But I like.
Who would want to? I wouldn't want to give any attention to it.
Yeah, that's yeah. Don't give them power. It's like a hex. You don't talk about a hex. You don't.
But it's still, you can't even believe it anyways. I don't think there's such a
thing. Yes, I agree. Okay, Jesse, are you prepared for a world without live audiences? Well, Jesse, we just discussed that, and no, I'm not. I refuse to surrender. In the words of Blitz, never surrender, never give in, never let the enemy win. So, all right, now Dave Molly, is the first season of the West Wing just Star Trek, The Next Generation, without spaceships? You know, that's a good question, but I've never seen the West Wing, so I'm not qualified to answer that question, which is, I know what you're saying. You're saying, how could this person be a cultural critic when they have no idea about modern culture? And I think that's a fair critique, but I would never call myself a cultural critic. Anyway.
You wrote about Seinfeld in the Psychic Sophia, which predates that book. Right. But that is, you know, in a way, there is a cultural criticism going there. And all your politics is cultural criticism as well, isn't it, to some degree?
I guess you're right. You're right. Well, anyway, I've never seen The West Wing, but I will. I'm going to watch it so that I can answer this question.
Fuck that. Don't waste your time watching some old TV show, please.
But
I'd rather you watch Westworld and comment on Westworld.
What if there's conventions in the future? But what if people start dressing up like the characters from West Wing and attending these West Wing conventions in the future? You know, that could be weird. And then I might feel left out. Okay, Nadia Gomez, another question. Have you had any significant archetypical dreams during this period? By this period, I assume that Nadia Gomez is referring to the quarantine period. And, you know, I've just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can repeat my dreams right now, but it was basically, it was a room, and it was like that room, but it wasn't really that room. It was anyway, and you were there, but it wasn't you. Anyway, okay, so now final question. We're gonna have one more thing that we're gonna answer, which is we're gonna say this PG joke. Glenn, do you have any PG jokes?
I can't think of one offhand. I know you and I have told some of our PG jokes and some of our not PG jokes. And I just can't, you know, I wasn't prepared for that question, unfortunately. I just, you know, I'm not a comedian. You know, I think a lot of that generation that asks these kind of questions, they're all, you know, they always have something, you know, witty to say. I'm not like that. I'm not really always ready to say something witty. I don't have all the answers right away. I got to think about stuff, you know, and even though they warned us 10 minutes ago, you know, I'm not a fucking joker. I mean, I might have a funny joke now and then that, you know, comes to mind, but.
Oh, you know what? I've been looking at the wrong thing, because now on the chat, there's a Q&A, which I haven't even looked at. And Sam Consiglio, who's a friend of mine from Detroit, who lives in New York, said, I recently read the stock market is the only thing that can be considered contemporary art now. What do you think? Now, as far as that goes, I don't know, because I've never been to the stock market. I'm really confused about all the people yelling, like all the people yelling at one another. But if you watch the Antonioni film, La Ventura, there's you know, the scene with Alan Delon, and you know, he's a stockbroker in Rome, and he's yelling, and he's like, and it does seem like performance art. There's a lot of performance going on, and you can really definitely see that it's a kind of precursor. Maybe the stock market kind of informs like hardcore in a way, you know, like the whole thing of everybody's screaming and everybody's in, but they all have a stake. They all have a stake in it. It's not like a stadium rock thing, you know. Everybody's like they're all, you know, and they've all maybe got I don't know. So yeah, so maybe. Oh wait, I think there's one other question. I think
who directed that movie? who directed that movie, by the way? And the other thing is,
Antonioni, who made Blow Up.
oh, okay. The movie that informed me about the stock market really was just trading places.
Somebody corrected me. Adam said The Eclipse is the film you're thinking of, and he's right. There's 3 films by Antonioni in this trilogy: L'Avventura, The Eclipse, and La Nota. And so I got the name wrong. So excuse me. I'm covered with shame right now. Okay. So anyway, I think we should sign off because I think I'm.
And we went over our time. Since someone told a joke here to kick us off, to kind of kick us in gear to tell a joke, and it reminded me of the punk rock one. How many punk rockers does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Oh, how many?
1 in 20 on the guest list.
Hey, I want to say thank you to Glen.
Wait. And how many A&R people does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Oh, how many?
I don't know. What do you think? I always thought that was pretty cool. That's a music business one.
That's great.
Anyways, yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Ian, show your book again.
Oh yeah. So we're here.
There's Chris right there.
Oh yeah.
Of the Psychic Sophia, which is available from Powerhouse, and this is a Powerhouse Arena event, and it's just been reissued by Akashic for the new era. It's a new, ready-to-read street. It's made with durable plastic cover for if you're smashing into a CVS or something, and you're like, maybe there's some fire, like an exploding police car. This cover is durable. It's going to make it through the fire. It's going to make it through the smoke. And and like I said before, Akashic is offering a fun bundle with.
Wait. Here's my 2 Akashic books. Ian wrote the introduction to this one. Could you guys see that properly? The Fugazi book. Ian wrote the introduction to that book. And of course, there's the classic that they just republished. That one.
All right.
It's Ian's thing, but they are Akashic books, and that is part of the fun bundle that he was discussing.
I think you need a secret password or something. Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks for
actually, can I ask one more question?
Oh, sure.
On the subject of like recontextualizing your writing, I just remember a few years back at the Whitney Biennial, the pages from Censorship Now that were like blown up really big, and I already love
the artist Francis Stark.
Yeah.
Brought me. Oh wait, sorry. Yeah, the artist Francis Stark painted because censorship in art, or the idea of what should be promulgated or proliferated was kind of it was in the air, and or maybe that might not be the motivation at all, but anyway, Francis Stark, who does a lot of text-based art, or no, maybe not text-based art, but art with content, and political art. Actually, I don't want to typify it as political because I hate being called a political artist. I hate that. So, but anyway, the point is, Francis Stark painted my essay, Censorship Now, from my 3rd book, Censorship Now, on Akashic Books, and it was in the Whitney Biennial, and it was really cool. It looked beautiful.
I thought it was great.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it was cool because I already loved the book, but then just to see it in that context was just like it had a whole other effect. It was really powerful.
But yeah, I thought it was incredibly well executed, and because she had told me that, I'm doing this thing, and I was like, oh cool, and then when I saw it, it was whoa, it was it was like, wow, incredible.
Well, cool. So, hopefully the reissue has the same kind of recontextualizing effect.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you very much for setting this up. It was
Thank you to you. Thank you to Glenn
for tuning in.
Thank you for everybody who asked questions.
Yeah.
Thanks for everything. And it is Ian Svenonius. He's the real deal, people. He's great. A big inspiration for me. The greatest conversationalist I've ever known. And thanks for having me, Ian, and thanks for asking me to host this thing.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you very much. It's an honor, actually. Thanks.
And,
Okay,
book is for sale. Link in the chat. It's 10% off at Powerhouse. Buy it, and the event will be up on YouTube soon.
cool. Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.